I was reading Shonda Rhimes' Year of Yes. She's the creator of Grey's Anatomy. And she basically talked about how people say no constantly and what would happen if you basically started saying yes. So for 1 year, I did an experiment on myself where no matter what anyone asked me, I had to say yes. This is also why I'm your neighbor, because I had no intention of moving on any level.
Welcome to Growing Inspiration, the podcast that nurtures your passion for the arts and creativity. I'm your host, Shayna McLean, and I'm thrilled to take you on this delightful journey through the vibrant world of arts and culture. In each episode, you can expect engaging interviews with a diverse range of artistic and creative individuals. We'll delve into what inspires them, explore their unique creative processes, and discover how their art enriches their lives. Together, we'll uncover the beauty of literature, the performing arts, the visual arts, food, wine, and spirits, and the inspiration gained through travel. Whether you're a connoisseur or just beginning your exploration, our conversations will inspire you to deepen your understanding and appreciation of the arts. So get ready to discover new perspectives, spark your creativity, and join a community of fellow art lovers. Have you ever run experiments on your own life? My guest today is Eliz Phillips, a creative director and my neighbor. Over the last few years, she has begun to take the perspective she has used in her work and apply it to her life. Seeing her life through a brand concept has allowed her to make broad changes and huge progress that wouldn't have been possible if approached in bits and pieces. I'm excited for you to hear her perspective on advertising, creativity, and overcoming fear. We have Eliz Phillips here today. She's a creative services director and also my neighbor. So she's agreed to come and talk to us about creativity and how that has become not only a career, but just a way of life for her. So thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, welcome.
And can you tell our listeners what it is that you kind of do for work and then kind of how you got into that field?
I am a senior director at a huge enterprise in DC, which I'm not allowed to say. That's okay. We basically help people who are 50 and beyond, and we help do different things like shape the marketplace. We help raise awareness about different benefits or products or services that are available to people as they age. And how I got into this role, I majored in mass communication and advertising in college. I worked at ad agencies. I've worked at a top 20 agency at one point that was here in this area. And I even started my own ad agency. And then I want to say like 9 years ago, somewhere in that range. It's all blurry at this point. I was reading Shonda Rhimes' Year of Yes. She's the creator of Grey's Anatomy. And she basically talked about how people say no constantly and what would happen if you basically started saying yes. So for 1 year, I did an experiment on myself where no matter what anyone asked me, I had to say yes. This is also why I'm your neighbor, because I had no intention of moving on any level. I'd been in my previous house for about 11 years. And basically, I went out to lunch with one of my previous coworkers, and I wanted to talk with her because a lot of women, I was noticing that they were not creative directors. It was, there were not people that are higher up. So she has 2 children, I have 3. I was actually curious how she's doing it because she was a creative director at the time. So I had lunch with her, and it was so casual to the point that I even brought my mom with me to go wander around DC together. And she ended up bringing her boss with her to this lunch. And at the end of the lunch, they actually offered me a job. I was not interested because I was already running my own agency at the time. I already had clients and everything. And basically, I was stuck because I committed to Year of Yes. So I was like, oh my gosh, I guess I am shutting down my own company and taking this opportunity. And it was basically for a startup agency. And essentially, a couple of years after the agency folded, and they essentially brought a handful of us into the headquarters, and they told me that I would essentially create this company's first creative services. And I think the company had been around for 25 years. And it was a very wild experience because a lot of the people didn't understand what an art director is or what a copywriter is or what creative is. And nothing was defined. So it was kind of like just really difficult to walk into the building and basically wonder, what do you all do here? Like, what is this place about? And so it took a while to get the hang of it. Now we're here.
Right.
So it's all good.
So you actually had to create a lot of your own standards and practices and everything. So there was a lot of creativity involved, but also you had to create some structure around that creativity. And so I know you've talked before about the college that you went to, but could we go even further back? I know you have discussed about how you kind of even got some of that interest in going to into a creative career. Where did that come from?
I think the earliest point I can go all the way back would be high school yearbook. I was a copywriter on the yearbook. And then I remember when I was a junior or a senior, I wanted to major in English or do something with English, but I didn't know like what I could be besides possibly a teacher. So I remember my counselor gave me a book on writing careers and I was flipping through it and I stumbled on copywriter and it was like, you will make TV commercials and magazine ads, which my entire bedroom was plastered with magazine ads. So I remember just thinking, that's freaking awesome. So I could be a copywriter forever. And basically that's what happened. And when I ended up going to VCU, I majored in advertising. And I got really lucky because at the time, they had just, I think a couple years after I got there, they opened up VCU Brandcenter. And so basically I ended up applying into the school and got in, and it's a amazing program. If you major in advertising, I think it's like ranked #1 in the world. Normally it's like, I think 1,000 plus people apply for each track and maybe 25 kids get in per track. And so it definitely, I feel like when we were there, you were basically taught by advertising legends, the actual people that would have created the very stuff that you were seeing. And so I feel like that was just amazing to have that kind of experience. And I think most people say it's like if you go there, it's like you have 2 or 3 years of work experience already because you're just learning that rapidly, know. But it was very intense though, but great.
Great. And so that kind of set you up you said you had your own agency. Like, what was that like going out and getting clients and then having to build the...
It was intense. I don't know. I don't know. A lot of people like startups and doing that, but I think if you are a one-person company at the time, like for me, it's like it's a lot of work. You're doing everything: project management, you're finding new business development, you're project managing. I mean, it's everything. And so at the time, I was actually working on healthcare mergers. This was like as Obamacare was like collapsing. And a lot of private practices basically were struggling to figure out how are they going to survive with Obamacare being dismantled. And so essentially a lot of the private practices were merging together to stay afloat, because how will they compete against like the big brands like UVA or Novant or any of those, right? And so essentially my first major one was doing stuff for like all of the GI doctors in all of Northern Virginia. They all came together and basically had to create like a brand for them. And I remember being very nervous at that time because some of these GI doctors actually do surgery on congressmen and women.
Oh, wow.
And so I remember being like, oh my God, this is like for real. Like their credentials are like phenomenal, right? And I was actually very intimidated because it's like, I'm just in advertising. These are like people who save lives, like, and important people. And I remember they took me to, what was it? I think it was Capitol Grill. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, like this is crazy. Cause I'm just saying, like, you saw these people's resume, they're in like top docs for Washington Magazine, like they're ranked. So I remember I had to take a deep breath before going into this room and thinking, you guys are amazing at what you do, but I am also amazing at what I do.
Right.
And you're here to listen to me. So I don't need to be freaked out that you guys have your records. And so I went in there and then I just crushed it.
Awesome.
And then basically I helped just kind of build the brand. I kind of reached out to a bunch of people in the network that are just phenomenal designers and account people. And I was just very surprised at how many people were willing to jump in and help create this. And so it was hard kind of wrangling all these different pieces together, different groups that had never spoken to each other. How do you align like essentially like 20 plus different offices into a single brand that they have to stand, for and believe in? I think that was like really like challenging to get them to buy into it. And then essentially make them become champions of it, so it was a lot of, I think, work. And then ended up getting another client that was a bunch of orthodox in like Denver, Colorado, same exact thing, where it was like they were the physicians for like Denver Broncos and things like that, where it was the same thing. Like, can you help us build, a site, the brand, all of that? And I feel like I was getting the hang of it. And I was at the time pitching like another group in Maryland for like ENT doctors. And I could see probably if I stuck with it, I could have kept going in that space. But I feel like I said, it's like when I committed to Year of Yes, it was hard. I was like, you know what happens when you just say yes? And I don't know, I think it's worked out, because I think it is one of those things where when you work by yourself, not that it's, that it cannot be done, but you're basically working like 80 to 100 hours a week, I feel like. And then it's like when you work at a company and all these people are hired, now you can kind of distribute the work to everyone evenly. And then it's not so crazy.
Right.
So I kind of feel like I like this space better. For me personally.
Right. But you do have that experience. You kind of know how to do that if you needed to, and how to do it even within the
Exactly.
company.
And that's why I thought it was helpful too, because it was completely a startup before. And then to walk into a different space where all of a sudden I had to like do it again. I felt like that experience just completely helped to be able to do it. Like, it wasn't intimidating. It was more like, I don't understand what you all do yet, but once I can understand your business models and where there's opportunities, and I can just kind of come in and help figure that out. So I think it's been really good. And I think as a creative, I think when you work in-house, I think there's a lot of pushback in the last couple of years of people not wanting to do that. But I think that if you are creative and you're in-house, the asks are different than if you work in an ad agency. Because in an ad agency, you might just do like marketing, right? You might just do an ad. But when you're in-house and you're responsible for all of the creativity in a company, then the asks are different because they don't know who to turn to. So like, for example, like during COVID, they had told us that we were moving one block up and we were going to go to a new space that I'd never been in. And they took all the walls down to the studs. And my background is copywriting, right? I keep saying copywriter, writer, I write words on Microsoft Word, basically. And they were like, you're going to design the headquarters. You're going to figure out which walls will have murals. If there's posters, you're going to design this out. And I remember saying, like, I'm going to remind you all again that I am a copywriter. Like, I'm not that kind of designer. Like, that's not even what we do. We don't design buildings. We make ads. But I remember they basically were like, no, you guys can totally handle this. And I remember just being like, I am terrible with blueprints. I can't even design my house. I can't understand this space. And so it was a great opportunity. And we basically ended up doing it. I think we probably could have got away with just painting some of the walls peach or whatever color we chose to do. But we ended up doing all sorts of stuff like glass decals. We basically completely put murals all over the place. We built a breezeway. We had to figure out like frames and posters and what the templates would be for these things. And I think it was a good experience because I think previously when I looked and we used to walk down the hallway, it used to look like a lawyer's office. It was just very dated. And so we completely modernized everything in the whole building. And it was awesome because people were, when they came back, I think that was a hard thing. People didn't want to come back. Like most people, you just got really comfortable at home. But I think when people came back, they felt very like energized with the colors and the designs, and people were taking selfies. So I was like, that was, that was great, you know, but it's just, I think is when you go in-house, the projects just become very different. So I feel like as a creative, it just pushes you further because you're not just doing like an ad. Like I've had to help design t-shirts and it could just be anything that they ask.
Right.
Somebody was asking if I could build a kiosk. You just don't know what they're going to ask. So it's been interesting,
Yeah. Now, have you had to build some of those skills with like the design software and graphic and stuff, or do you have people that kind of work with you?
I have people that work with me. Usually it's like there's so much volume going through that we have to distribute a lot of it. And honestly, it's so much that's flowing through. We do have like agencies that we work with, and we have a lot of contractors that do different things. It just really depends like what's in the queue. Like I remember even during COVID at one point, they had opened a facility off-site somewhere, and I had to find someone that could design like athletic gear and like water bottles and like the whole what you would imagine you would need if you were opening kind of a healthcare space. And so it was interesting to find, look for somebody like that kind of specialty. So I always tell people, like, sometimes you'll just get a request where it's so niche, you got to look for that talent. And then sometimes we'll just bring it in house and just find out from, people that have zero experience, like to say, like, do you want to give it a go? Do you want to try it? And then it's been interesting because like, they'll be like, okay, I've never designed a glass water bottle. Let me figure out how you get the design on, like what colors, how does it work? So I feel like it's been good because I think everybody has been growing kind of together,
right?
Cool.
Yeah. So how do you know when you've landed on a good idea and what to get rid of? How do you know what makes it to the top?
I will say that I think usually for me, I think it's when you get like a hit. And if you don't feel anything, then you have to keep going. You just feel like a eureka moment of like either the hair on your arm is standing up, or you just feel like this excitement to where you just want to go running down the street and tell everybody about how amazing this idea is. I think a lot of times people stop too soon. And I think people usually will come up with like one or two good ideas, maybe three, and then they just call it a day. But I think sometimes you got to go to like the 100th or 200th idea. And at some point when you have reached that, then it happens. It's almost like you think about like when you are brainstorming, I think that a lot of times there's just a lot of baggage and experience or just thoughts that you have, and you have to purge all of it out.
Right.
And I feel like once you've purged all of it out, that's like where the good stuff then comes.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of times it's the same thing. I feel like if you think of like with AI, right? So like if you put your first prompt in, it just generates something that's kind of like, okay. Like if you kept noodling with it and you're at the 50th prompt, kind of just keep revising and revising, you can see how it's sharpening.
Right.
And I feel like it's the same process. It's like if you just stop at the second idea, I guess it makes you realize you don't know which ideas you missed out on because you stopped too soon.
Right.
That's why I feel like you just wait for the hit.
Yeah.
And even if I did 200 ideas, if I don't feel the hit, then I got to go to 300 or 400. Wow. You just keep going until you feel it,
You mentioned AI. How much do you use AI in your work, and like how do you use it while still maintaining your own creativity?
We use it in different ways. We're not allowed to use the generative portion of it in the sense of like creating imagery and putting it out into the marketplace right now. But I'll use it sometimes for strategy. And then we've done it for channel optimization. So for example, like a lot of different channels that are out there, let's just take Facebook, for example. We might have created like 1,000 different Facebook ads the previous year, in 2023. And in 2024, we got over 500,000 permeations out. Wow. And it's basically just, nowadays it's like the right message is reaching the right person. So it's like you're just basically now designing and writing in a different way. Before we would create like single units. And now it's basically all broken apart where each headline is independent, each image is independent, each post copy is independent, and the user is determining the combination. It's not us anymore. Wow. So I feel like it's a different way of saying it, because I think a lot of times when people talk about AI with creativity, they just think, oh, someone's, creating an image. But I think there's a whole other way multiple ways that it's happening right now. I think for ours, just that part and letting people themselves decide, I think has been empowering to be like, even if you have 20 or 30 years experience and you think you know what the right one is, it's like the people know more than you will ever know. Right. So it's been interesting to see that.
When you kind of run into a creative block, is it just like you said, just like pushing through to that 300th or 400th idea, or how do you kind of get past that?
Yeah, I think for myself personally, I don't force it because I feel like it will just basically get you frustrated. So I feel like when that happens, I usually will try to do something that is creative.
Okay.
So then it could be like going to a museum or going to take a road trip or, but I always like step away. I feel like it's one of those things where it's like, you just keep beating at it, but your mind is not there and your passion is kind of flat. It just seems like you're forcing it. And then the ideas, I think you keep generating on them or working on them, you can just tell. I feel like if I came back from an amazing road trip where I just did something crazy and was like, I don't know, something unexpected, I feel like you could instantly see if I came up with ideas right after that trip versus when I'm burning out, how different they are. I never do things at the last minute. I always bake in extra time.
Okay.
So I feel like if that ever happens, then I just basically go do something different,
Have to kind of not look at it directly, kind of look at it out of the corner of your eye.
Exactly.
And eventually come to it. Right. Not as inspired perhaps as it might have otherwise been.
Exactly.
And so how do you apply creativity in your own life beyond your work? Is that something that you kind of can see in your everyday life?
Yes. I think that for 30 years doing creativity and creative stuff, I only applied it to my work. But then like 2 years ago, it dawned on me like, oh my gosh, like if you think about like when you're creating an idea for something, right? If you're trying to solve something, generally, I feel like in advertising or marketing, you will come up with multiple ideas. And then you usually present these ideas to a client and the client will end up picking the idea. But I can frame the concept however I want. I could say, oh, this one would make somebody possibly feel good about living longer. This one could make somebody feel empowered emotionally. This one, could make somebody just be aware of something, right? And what it means to be aware and knowledgeable. But I can put that viewpoint in any idea, right? So there's different pathways. I never thought about applying that to my life ever, the idea that you can concept even in your own life. And it made me think like, why am I doing this for brands and businesses? What would happen if I actually applied that to my life, right? And so a couple of years ago, I was like, let me experiment again and try this out. So I was like, I'm going to put a concept out there, which was conquering my fears, right? I was like, let me do this on myself. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know where it's going to go. And I feel like when I started, it was like I was afraid of everything. I acknowledged that within myself. I'm everything I'm afraid of. So I was like, let me hold a snake. And I held the tiniest little snake ever. And I was like freaked out. I remember I held a gun. I was like scared to death. Did the race car thing, right? I went into the river gorge and crossed that bridge. I was on a harness, but I still did it. And I kept trying all these things. And then it was crazy because as I was doing each one, it became easier. And I was shocked because then like a couple minutes later, I was like, let me try the snake one again. And I found some guy out here that brings snakes to a hotel. Like he does like wildlife training. And he basically at the end let us hold the snakes. And it was huge. And he was like, I'll let you hold it. And I just remember I was holding the snake and it surprised me because it stretched out on its own. It was like hissing in my face. I was like, oh my God. I would have previously screamed and ran for my life. But it's been interesting because I feel like at this point now it's like I'm not like afraid to do things. Like I even did like a solo trip last year where I went to Antelope Canyon. I was like, let me just do it. I want to see if I could actually just get out there and try it. And so I feel like now when I want to do something, I'm like not afraid to do it. And so I feel like it's been interesting thinking about like, if you could put a concept, because I think sometimes when you think about like when you do your New Year's resolutions for people, you have like 20 or 30 different ideas. You're like, I want to lose weight. I want to do this. I want to go here. And, it's too broad. There's too many directions.
Okay.
And I thought about like when you come up with a campaign, right? Like it's like just do it, for example, right? Everything just falls through that one lens. What does it mean to just do it?
Okay.
Right? The whole brand, everything is through one lens, one voice, one perspective. And then it's like easier to execute because there's no delineating from it. So it made me think like, what if you applied that to yourself instead of having 50 goals and being overwhelmed and quit? What if it was like a single lens?
Right.
And I feel like for me, I've just been able to execute faster, even in my own personal life, because now it's just like focused. Right. Like, previous year was like fear. now it's like getting strong.
Yeah.
That's why now I'm like doing all this crazy working out and stuff. But I feel like it's easier to do it through that.
Right.
You're
So
not
you just have like one broad concept, and then you apply that to different aspects of your life.
Exactly. But it's just a wild thing to be like, you can actually apply like conceptual, like the idea of a concept to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just a weird way of looking at it now. Like, wait a minute, like, you could literally create a concept every year for the rest of your life.
Mm-hmm.
And then what would it be?
Right.
So if you were like, I'm going to do something about like, came up with your own tagline, like conquer your bucket list, for example, like just imagine 1 year of living through that perspective and how different it would be. Like, hey, this year, all the trips we're going to take are going to be epic because we're trying to conquer our bucket list.
Yeah.
And it makes you think like, why do I have to wait 20 years for that? I could just do it this year on this concept.
Right.
And then you're done.
Right. Is that going to be next year's?
That's what I'm looking at.
Yeah.
They're trying to make it to Mount Fuji.
Wow, that'd be awesome.
Yeah. Yep.
Great. If someone were trying to get into copywriting or just a creative kind of career, what would you advise them to do or to look for in a program or in their own like experience and practice?
I would probably say that I think the first part is that most people probably have to just work on getting over their fear. Because I think most people are creative, but like even if you aren't in the creative field, and let's just say you work in an office, you will hesitate to share your ideas because you think people will judge you. So you could be in a group discussion on any topic of any kind. And even if you're like listening to everybody, you might be like, oh, I have something. But then you're like, what if they think it's dumb? What if it's not smart enough? What if it's not, it's off the bat? Or what if it's too different for them? You are afraid of how people will look at you. So you just don't do it. And so I think that applies everywhere. Like, I think if you get over the fact that it's like, it's an idea, and if you don't ever express it at any level, then it's like you're already doomed no matter if you went to the best school or anywhere.
Right.
I think part of it is just being like you have a different and unique perspective that's different than anyone else's, because everyone's experience and how they're raised and how they grew up, everything is just different. And I think most people have to just get to that point where they accept that part. And I feel like once you do that, your ideas will flow. I think if you stop yourself from coming up with the ideas, there's nothing anyone can do to help you, because you're just basically, I feel like creativity is like a very natural, free-flowing process. And I think if you are afraid of your own ideas and what it means to bring them out into the world, then I look at it, it's like, I don't see how even going to school or studying or any of that can make a difference. You can be the best ever, but even if you went to those schools, if you were still afraid to express your voice or your opinion or your ideas, it seems pointless. That's why I feel like the first part is just believing that your ideas deserve to be heard.
Right.
And I feel like even if you don't have an audience, you can always just put it in a journal or sketch it out or write it out. But I think a lot of times, even in, my working experience, you could be in a whole room full of people and somebody might end and say, okay, does anyone else have any ideas? And no one speaks up. And it's like, that's impossible.
Right.
That is an impossible thing. If somebody just asked a question about like, again, could be something about like working out, that nobody would have an idea. And it could be that silent.
Yeah.
It's like, even if your idea is just a kernel of something, right? Even just something random. It's just the fact that people literally are so afraid. And I find that fascinating. That's why I feel like for me, the whole conquering the fear part, because it's like, I wasn't afraid of the creative part, but the other realm. But now I feel like that I've kind of conquered all that. Like I can be in meetings now or things that I have no knowledge of on any level and just feel relaxed to say it.
Right.
Even on the business side now. But I just think like once you master that, then obviously you can go to college and, learn some of these things from these schools. But I think that's the first part. Like people are very afraid to share ideas. And I don't know if they're intimidated or they're insecure of what it might be, but.
Oh, well, that's very good advice. Is there anything else about your creative work or just creativity in general? You seem to have thought very deeply about like the philosophy of creativity. Is there anything else that you'd like to just share?
I would probably just say that I think a lot of people don't want to go into the creative field anymore because I feel like with AI, I think people believe that it's doesn't matter or it's obsolete. But I personally think there's still value in pursuing something that's creative because I feel there's a lot of parts like a lot of people might do a certain job and they're not passionate about it. So I feel like if you are a creative person, like to not pursue that and try to just do a regular job, I almost feel like that is like catastrophic. Like, you know, you're just doing something and you don't feel passionate about it. But I also think with AI, it's going to continue obviously growing and learning, but it's still at a point where it's like a 2-year-old. It's like an infant. And I feel like when you try to get it to do things, it still does so many things that are wrong, like, you know, like stereotyping.
Yeah.
I was trying to actually get it last year to generate some images of myself and the running around the neighborhood with my rescue dog. And I couldn't believe how many stereotypes that this thing had. It was crazy. I did 50 versions of it. And as I kept aging it, and it kept making me younger. As I said, like, I'm not skinny like that. Add 20 pounds, 30 pounds, 40 pounds. It still kept making me like a size 000. And I was like, what in the world? Then I was like, age me to 70 and it still looked 40. Wow. And so I kept thinking about like that it's still a long way to go to understand like what it looks, what is aging look like in society.
In a real person.
Yeah. And like, exactly. And what does it mean? But I don't know. I just think there's a lot of people that are not pursuing creative fields anymore. I think, you know, it's like, they'll say like arts are dumb or, you know, that you're just wasting your money doing that. But I kind of feel like at this point, even for myself, I can be dropped in to any department, any project, any team, in any way, and I can bring creative ideas to solve in a way that they can't do because I look at it differently.
Right.
They might be doing something where it's like expected. And I kind of feel like if you pursue something in a creative field, like, and you keep kind of like working on that part, I feel like you're going to bring value to whatever company that you work at because they're going to need your point of view to evolve and to innovate.
Right.
You know, I think there's certain points where it's like, I think there's just not enough credit for creativity. And I think sometimes people just think of like art or writing, but I think if you're really a creative person, it will go beyond that. You know, I think you could actually possibly come up with new ideas, products, services, and things that they didn't think about.
Right. There's such a need for innovation, you know, in the world and all the different things that we have to create, even just to keep up with AI and all the new technologies.
Exactly.
Well, thank you so much for being with us today, and really excited to hear what people have to say, you know, about the concepts and maybe their own experiences with AI and creativity. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. Yep. Awesome.
Thank you for joining me on this episode of Growing Inspiration. I hope you found today's conversation as inspiring as I did. If you enjoyed the show, please take a moment to subscribe and share it with your friends. To dive deeper into the world of arts and creativity, visit my website at gardenofmydelights.com for exclusive content and resources, including show notes. Don't forget to subscribe to my newsletter for the latest updates and insights. You can also connect with me on Instagram for more inspiration at Garden of My Delights. Until next time, keep nurturing your creativity and looking for beauty and wisdom all around you.